Okay, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. A smooth start to the day.
Absolutely.
No problems, no weird noises, nothing.
No. This is for context in the world around us, a snowy Sunday.
It is. Freezing.
So much so that church was called off.
Yeah.
Windshield is below zero.
It is.
I mean, it is freezing. Last night, I got back from a trip, got outside, and the wind was like a slap in the face.
Yeah.
It was so cold.
Yeah.
It made me want to move away.
Yeah.
But here I am still.
Here we are.
Because
it takes more than freezing cold temperatures to stop this podcast.
Yes, this is where the Jeremy and Andy podcast is, and so this is where I am.
Exactly.
I'm Jeremy, you're Andy, and
it's true.
This is what we do.
It is. We brave the elements.
That's right.
Especially when the gimmick of the week is audience participation.
That's right. Yeah. We have invited everyone into this world with us,
and we don't want to let them down.
Of course not.
Yeah.
So as you said, audience participation. We put the feelers out there. We ask the questions. Does anybody have any movie questions for us to answer, or just movie takes you want us to respond to? And we got some really great responses.
I was really happy with our responses.
And it's the type of thing where I was loving reading the questions as I was going through. I started getting nervous, like, man, I hope I come up with good answers for these. I don't want to let the people down.
No.
It may seem like what we do is just sort of shoot from the hip and ask questions later, and sometimes that is.
Sometimes it's true.
But we do try to put out a good product that people will enjoy. And
I just hope you enjoyed all week long getting random texts from me that were just like, no context, just here was the question, and I've like, he's probably teaching at school, and he's just getting these like, what's the greatest movie sequel of all time? Yep. And he's like, I'm trying to educate the youth of America, leave me alone.
No, I appreciated it every time, because I was like, that's awesome, we're getting more questions.
Yeah.
You did bring up one of the questions that I just want to say, we're not going to answer all the questions people send to us.
But they will be addressed.
None of the questions were bad. There were no questions that we threw out saying, like, I just don't want to talk about this question. It's more that some of the questions were like, these are just going to be great topics for an entire episode.
They warrant their own podcast, yeah.
So as we're trying to get through many questions today, we're like, we just get bogged down talking about these topics. So people ask questions about sequels, best movie villains, best trilogy, all these things. We're like, these are going to end up being episodes in and of themselves. So if you're like, they didn't answer my question,
stay tuned.
We will.
Because I'm already excited about those episodes.
Yeah, I am too. And it's really fun just knowing there's all these ideas on the slate. Like, we're not about to run out of ideas soon, I don't think.
I don't think so.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to ask the questions that have been asked. We're going to do our best to answer them. If you can remember who shared the question with you, we'll try to give them a shout out.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I probably should have told you that in advance, but
it's okay. I'm just afraid I'm going to forget someone.
That's okay. I will say you got a much better response than I did. I'm bringing like 2 or 3 questions to the table.
That's okay.
You've got like 7 or 8 good ones. That's all right. So I just made a sort of master list to go through. I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to go in this order, so I'm going to tell you what we can do. We can bounce back and forth, and we can take turns choosing a question that we're ready to talk about.
Sure.
So here's one that I think is a good one to jump in on.
Okay.
Again, not even at the top of my list, but because it's sort of a big pop culture movie franchise, somebody asked for our Star Wars thoughts. They said overrated, underrated, or properly rated. So, Andy, I will throw it to you first. What are your thoughts on Star Wars?
Oh, sheesh. My Star Wars thoughts are, I like the universe as a whole. I think it's always cool when someone can create a universe like that. And I wasn't alive when Star Wars Episode 4 came out, so I don't know what it was like to have that, just that freshness of this universe that just took the whole world by storm. By the time I grew up, Star Wars was just a part of your life. We talked about it, I think, when we talked about Batman, how you grew up at a certain time period and you just, these characters or these movies or this universe was just part of your life. That being said, I do think if you really take the movies and lay them all out on the table, there are a lot of misses. And I'm not trying to have like a hot take, I'm not going, because I've seen people go so far as like, people love Star Wars, and those are the worst movies I've ever seen. I would not go that far at all. But, you rewatch, like, A New Hope now, I don't think it's that good. Mark Hamill's really bad in that movie. All due respect, I know Luke Skywalker is a beloved character. He's not a really good actor at that time in 1977. He comes across as real whiny. The effects are cool. That doesn't bother me. Like the dating of the effects or anything like that doesn't bother me at all. But it's okay. I like Empire. I like a lot of Return of the Jedi. The prequels are just not very good. I don't think I have no desire to revisit those. Trying to think through the movies real quick. I did like, what is the standalone one called? Oh my gosh, Rogue One. I really liked Rogue One. And then this new trilogy, it came out, The Force Awakens, and I was excited. Star Wars has done a great job of just, like, they just suck you in. Like, I'm not even like a Star Wars junkie, and when they announced it, I was like, awesome. I'll go see that, probably opening night. And I liked it. I liked the new characters. And then it just fell apart fast. Like, I was like, did you just hire 3 different directors and nobody talked about? It's like they didn't build a cohesive trilogy at all. And so, and I know, like, The Mandalorian is well received. I'll be honest with you, I'm not up to date on my Star Wars Disney Plus shows. So I like Star Wars. I don't hold it in some kind of high reverence, some elite category. I don't think it's garbage. Like, I'll see people post that online. I think, maybe some of the movies are bad, but, it's fine. I will say this, I bet no matter what we say, positive or negative, George Lucas probably doesn't care because he's probably made more money on Star Wars since we started recording this podcast 5 minutes ago than you or I were ever making our lifetime. So George Lucas is doing just fine. He obviously created something that connected with people in some way or another. But like I said, if you lay all the movies out on the table, there's some misses there for sure. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. I'm not going to say too much because I mostly just agree with you.
Yeah.
I wrote probably properly rated, and I said it's hard to say because the people who love it. And
you're not going to change their mind, and that's fine.
It's one of those, there's a rabid fan base, and so, you may say it's overrated if that's what you're looking at, but I think for the culture at large, I think most people are kind of like, yeah, it's all right. I'll watch them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what they deserve. It's a franchise, like you said, there's some good installments, some mediocre installments, or some bad installments. And just so overall, it just sort of averages out to middling.
There you go.
And that's about where I think it is. It's
same.
No offense to it. No. I'm nothing great about it. It just exists, and it's fine.
It is. And it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon. I think there's several Star Wars projects. I just read 2 days ago where they just announced a Mandalorian movie.
Wow.
Directed by Jon Favreau. So, I mean, I don't know. It just, if you like it, you like it, and that's fine. I'm not knocking anybody. Darth Vader is a cool character. They've created some neat things and stuff, but they just seem like they've had a hard time making like I said, this last trilogy, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It just one movie didn't flow well into the other movie, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think I am, where I am with Star Wars is about where I am with the MCU at this point. Mm-hmm. I'm to the point where it's like, if one comes out and I'm hearing good things,
you'll
I'll
go
watch
check it out.
If one comes out and I'm hearing, oh, this was one of the misses, I have no problem with
pass. Yeah. Yep. Fair enough.
All right. You want to pick our next question?
Sure. I'm going to pick one because my answer kind of ties back into your question. Someone asked, what was the biggest movie theater letdown you've ever had in all your movie going life? And I thought that was a really good question. So we'll let you take that one first.
All right. So I couldn't pick, and I narrowed it down to 2. Okay. So these are my 2. The first one is the movie Gladiator. When Gladiator came out, I was in high school. I don't know. I think I was 15 or 16. So right at the age where these kind of action movies were my favorite thing. I was like, oh, this looks like a fun sword and sandals action movie. Mm-hmm. My brother took me to see it on opening weekend because I told him I really wanted to see it. And he's like, all right, I'll take you. Let's go. And so it was one of those days I was really excited to see it before anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it, and I was like, oh, I didn't like that. That wasn't very good.
And it had all this hype behind it.
And that's sort of the thing that was so frustrating. Is like I was disappointed, but it was really like the frustration was enlarged and enraged by then all I could hear for the next while. When I went back to
movie of the year.
It wasn't that good, and everybody's like, Gladiator is one of the most incredible movies ever. It won Best Picture, and everything that happened that people just kept adding praise to it just made me more and more frustrated with like I didn't like this
Didn't Russell
movie.
Crowe win Best Actor for that movie?
He may have.
I think he did. And you're like, I guarantee there was better performances that year.
It just for an action movie, I couldn't handle watching in the action. It was that shaky cam stuff that was really popular for a bit there, and it gave me a headache. I was like, I
don't like this.
And so when the action isn't there for me, then it's like, well, how great is the story? And it's like, it's fine.
It's fine.
I knew the story from the poster.
Yeah.
It literally
tells you everything you need to know.
The tagline is like the story of the movie. So that was a big disappointment for me. The other one, which is probably a popular answer for a lot of people, is The Matrix Revolutions. The first Matrix, I still maintain, is a great movie.
Yeah.
Tainted, of course, by the sequels. The second one was this sort of like teetering movie. It wasn't great, but when it ended, there was a sense of like, okay, if the third one really like completes it, I think the second one will kind of tilt towards good.
That is not what happened.
No, what happened was the third one was
a mess.
Really bad, and suddenly this franchise, which started off with such amazing promise, just
fizzled out.
Immediately, collapsed in the public consciousness.
Sure did.
And what started, so great, just finished so with a whimper.
Oh yeah, because I can tell you, like when the first Matrix came out, it was a conversation. You know, it's like the water cooler talk and stuff you'd never seen before in movies, and it almost immediately started getting ripped off, or So,
I still credit it for being maybe the spark that made superhero movies really start.
I think that's fair.
Even though it wasn't a superhero movie,
it's got a lot of that.
Doing the effects and the things they were doing was like made you go, oh, they can like make that look really real.
Yep.
And
I honestly I can't get into the second one even. Like I remember there's like a really cool like freeway chase and there's some cool stuff, but it just really quickly felt like it just got bogged down. And there was times in the second one I'm like, wait, who is this? Or why is this person? It just got too confusing.
It did. It was a world that was, we've talked about this multiple times, it was a world that the more mystery was around it, the better it was. And the more they kept going into the mystery, it was like, I don't really like what's behind the curtain.
They got lost in the weeds pretty quick.
And the other thing, too, is this isn't their fault, but the reality is just technology was moving very rapidly at the time. And the stuff they were doing was like groundbreaking in the moment and very quickly became dated.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
So, you get that fight with Neo versus all the Agent Smiths. When it first came out, I was like, well, this is incredible. Look at this.
Now it looks like a video game.
It wasn't very many years later where people were laughing going, look at Rubber Neo and this bad CGI video game looking scene.
That's a really good point.
So, it got dated really fast.
Nothing worse than being let down by a movie. The very first thing that came to my mind was Star Wars The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
I was 19 at the time, and again, going back to Star Wars, like I wasn't even like the most diehard Star Wars fan, but it was just such a part of the culture. And that was the first time in my, later teen, young adult life that a new Star Wars movie had come out. Before that, the last Star Wars thing had been Return of the Jedi, which was 1983. So now you're into 1999. So you're talking years and years. And you look back and it's like, maybe that movie never would have lived up to the hype. But it's also just not a very good movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think maybe in some ways it would have never, ever lived up to it. But they just didn't make a very good movie. And I actually, at some point in the last, I want to say like 2 or 3 years, I took it upon myself to rewatch that. And I was like, maybe that movie gets a bad rap. And I was like, no, it's just not a good movie.
I think it also goes right along with the technology thing we were saying about the Matrix.
Yeah.
In the moment, it was like, look at all this cool stuff we could do with CGI, and it did take long before the CGI looked bad.
And plus, too, it was like, they just, I don't know, it just kind of was like, we're just going to do everything in this movie. Like, there's that long scene, like some kind of pod race or something that has nothing to do with the plot of the movie, and it just kind of felt like they were showing off. The kid actors Natalie Portman's good, but like the little kid actor just doesn't deliver. in my opinion. And it was just a big. I think I've told this story before. It was like I went to see it with a couple of friends, and after it got over, we were like, "Yeah, that was good." Right? And then like
you try to convince yourself.
And then finally, like 20 minutes into the car ride home, someone was just like, maybe it was me, I don't remember, someone else was like, okay, that wasn't good. And everyone was like, okay, thank you. Like we all wanted to say it, but you don't want to admit that something that has all this hype and build up is just not good. So that was it for me.
That was a good answer. All right. Let's ask the question that is just the flip side of that question. What's a movie that was, the question was asked, movie that was the most pleasant surprise in which you had little to no expectations for or you ended up really liking?
Sure. Man, I've seen a lot of movies in my life. And I looked far back because I was trying to think of to me, something that made a huge impact on me in high school was seeing Reservoir Dogs for the first time. And it's all about context, right? Because at that time, no one knew who Quentin Tarantino was.
Yeah.
And it was just this kind of underground movie that you only found out about when somebody else who knew a little bit more about movies than you did told you about it, which is what happened to me. So I go to the video store, rent it, check it out. And it's this movie, I've talked about it before. I didn't know movies could do this. I didn't know people could talk, about other things other than the movie and non-linear and flashbacks and all this stuff. So that one blew my mind. And again, you got to remember this is a world before Quentin Tarantino was a household name. So I was like, who did this movie? I want to go see every single thing this person does, and I have ever since then. So that had a big impact on me. Another one I thought of, this is really random, but this was about the time, I was 18 when this movie came out. And it's kind of that time where you're like, I want to try and, I'm not a kid anymore. I want to be more of a movie guy. And I went and saw Out of Sight with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez, directed by Steven Soderbergh, from an Elmore Leonard novel. And it was kind of me discovering who all these people were. I knew who George Clooney was, but George Clooney, good actor. Mm-hmm. And it was just whoa, he's good. And then Soderbergh does freeze frame, and then if he's in that movie, if they're in Detroit, the color of the movie is a certain way. If they're in Miami, the color is different. He did stuff like that, and that just blew my mind. And I didn't know at that time, for whatever reason, I didn't know much about any of these people, especially Soderbergh and all that. And then I saw that, and that quickly became one of my favorite movies. And to me, that movie kind of came out of nowhere. I remember reading there was a movie called Out of Sight coming out with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. That movie blew me away, and I think I ended up going to see it 3 times in the theater.
Nice.
So those are a couple. And then, just real quickly, I'll say this. Every year almost, some kind of movie just kind of sneaks up on me. This year it was Poor Things.
Yeah.
I didn't, up until 3 months before that movie came out, I didn't even know that was a thing. In other years there's different things. I won't go through them all now, but those movies that you just don't hear a lot about, or they somehow kind of fly under your radar, and then they just end up being really good movies. So,
yeah. I wrote, is it too early to say Godzilla -1? But
No.
we talked about that so much. I actually have other answers. So one of them is Ford versus Ferrari. That was one that, again, I saw. It was a Thanksgiving Day movie, 3 movies in a day thing, and it was the one I was kind of least excited about. And I was like, well, it's got some people I like in it, but I didn't really expect to like it because I'm not a car guy at all, and don't really care about car racing or anything like that. And so I went in just hoping, well, hopefully it will at least be well made and decently acted. And then I ended up loving the movie. It's one of my favorites of the year.
Really good movie.
And yeah, so that one really surprised me. Went home to Tennessee over Christmas break and told my dad and brother, who do love cars, I was like, we gotta go see this movie. So we all saw it together.
Nice.
And, it's probably the first time we've ever all 3 bonded over anything car related.
Right.
It's you guys like cars, I love movies. Let's all bond together with this. Just a couple others I wrote were Gone Baby Gone.
Yeah.
Which was Ben Affleck's directorial debut. I had no idea he'd be any good at it. Casey Affleck I always kind of liked, but I didn't know if he could carry a movie as a starring actor, and it was a great movie. Her. The premise of the movie had me not even see it for a long time. I was like, a guy falls in love with the
AI
on his
basically,
cell phone, basically
yeah.
like Siri.
Yeah.
But then it's really well done.
That was a good movie.
It, as a horror movie, which we actually saw together as a group, I only went because friends asked me to go, and I was
Sure,
like,
why not?
I was like, I don't really like horror movies,
That
but
is a
we'll go
good
watch
movie.
this. And I was so pleasantly surprised with how enjoyable it was. I could put It Chapter 2 on the disappointments list. And then the last one I wrote down was Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise movie, because
really fun movie.
yeah, didn't know I needed Groundhog Day in the sci-fi action world.
With Tom Cruise. Yeah. Edge of Tomorrow, aka Live, Die, Repeat.
Yes.
Like
AKA All You Need Is Kill.
Yeah, like I don't know how no one can figure out what the actual name of that movie is. Yeah, that's a blast too. I was so glad that question got asked because that is so fun. And I had more I could have listed. I wrote 7 as one. Back in the day, just came out of nowhere. Fincher had only done Alien 3, which was a dud.
Yeah. I heard a funny story about 7. I just got to say now that
funny. 7's just a funny movie.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
You may have heard this before, but Fincher was saying when he got the script and he read it and he read the ending, and he was like so shocked. He's like, movies can't end like this or whatever. But he got excited and called people and said he wanted to make it and was excited about that ending. And they said, "Oh, that's not the right ending. Like that was the first draft. We've had like 7 drafts since then. That's not how we can't end it like that." And he goes, "Well, no, I'm only going to do the movie if we can end it that way." So we only got the movie because they sent the wrong draft of the script to Fincher, who read it and loved it and said, "I'm only going to do it if we do it that way." And And
I've heard variations, and I heard like Pitt was the same way, where he was like, "No, like if you want me, we're doing this dark ending."
Yeah.
Which to me, and for my money, is the darkest ending in movie history.
Yeah.
Especially for a mainstream movie.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I forgot to mention this. One thing I wrote as a pleasant surprise to me was Gravity, which I do talk about a lot. I knew that was coming because I had read about it, but I remember, and I don't think I've ever been more wrong in my life, reading that Sandra Bullock was going to star in it, and I was like, I can just already tell. I just don't buy Sandra Bullock as an astronaut stranded in space, and she is phenomenal in that movie.
Really good.
So, yeah. Enough about that. Here's one I really want to hear what you have to say, so I'm going to ask this one. Someone asked, what is the most boring movie you've ever seen?
Oh, man. I wrote Maestro, ?
I wondered if you would say that.
No, I'm not going to say that again because I've talked about it before, although I think I've given this as an answer on here before. My default answer for years was Cold Creek Manor.
Yeah. The movie in which nothing happens.
Yes. I think it is the definition of a boring movie because there are movies, there's plenty of movies that I've been like, okay, let's go, let's drag, let's get through. Mm-hmm. But Cold Creek Manor is the ultimate, like, what were they even thinking? What movie did they think they were making?
How did this, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to be like the suspense thriller, but nothing suspenseful.
It's not suspenseful or thrilling
at all.
No.
It just sort of like very methodically builds to a very quick, unsuspenseful ending. Yeah. And you're just like, well, there was a movie, I guess.
That was a movie. Oh, that's a terrible.
That is my answer for the most boring movie, and I'm sure I could think of plenty others. Mm-hmm. I always kind of gauge movies by if I'm watching it at home in particular.
How much do you want to get your phone out?
How much do I want to get my phone out? Mm-hmm. When I really enjoy a movie, I don't even think about my phone.
Yeah.
And there's some movies where I can't get through this if I'm not doing something on my phone too, because it's really a struggle. And Cold Creek Manor is the one I always laugh about with friends because that's the movie we were seeing together and we thought about leaving because it was just so boring.
Yeah.
And instead what happened was we started making fun of it out loud.
And everyone appreciated that?
Rather than like anybody hushing us, they just like allowed it.
Yeah.
So we sat there and made fun of the movie out loud for the rest of the movie, and no one got onto us or like, hey, shut up, I really want to hear Dennis Quaid.
Yeah. Have like a little Mystery Science Theater 3000. Yeah.
So what about you?
I wrote 2 down. When I was younger, I was probably late teens and stuff. I was like, I need to go back and rewatch all these prestige movies. So I rented on VHS Gone with the Wind. And all due respect, I know that movie was a big deal at the time. I just was like, it became like a challenge where I was like, I don't like this movie at all. It is so boring, but I've come this far. I'm going to watch this movie. So I watched, at probably 17 years old, watched Gone with the Wind. And Talk about being bored.
Yeah.
And then, I could add like Casablanca, even Citizen Kane to me is a little like, and I'm not against old movies at all. I like a lot of old movies, but some of those ones, and I think because they were considered like these are some of the greatest movies ever made, and then I watched them and I was like, really, really bored. As far as the theater experience, this is such a random movie. My dad and I went to see the movie The Monuments Men. It's like George Clooney.
I know what it
I
is.
think he
never
directed
watched
it too.
He did.
That is, I've never been more bored in my life. Like nothing happens in that entire movie, and then all of a sudden the credits roll, and you're like, I'm so relieved this movie's over, but you're also like, wait, that's it? Like nothing happened. So that was the most boring movie, and that's filled with people I like. Clooney, Matt Damon's in it, Bill Murray's in it. I think Cate Blanchett's in it. John Goodman's in it, and it is just the most dull, boring movie. And I also agree with you. I actually saw Cold Creek Manor in the theater, and nothing happens in that movie, and I can't believe it got made. So, yeah, those are just a few random ones that jump out to me.
All right, we'll kind of, it's not quite the exact flip side of that coin, but somebody asked, what's the best laugh you've gotten from a film? Something that when you saw it for the first time really got you going. That question, I will say, comes out from my friend Nathaniel. So shout out to Nate for that question. And could you think of something that was like a big laugh you had in the movie?
I was trying to, it's like obviously you just start thinking back. I do remember being in the theater. I saw Dumb and Dumber in the theater, and I remember that movie getting a lot of laughs, particularly a scene with Jeff Daniels in which he is in a bathroom. And I just remember that getting a lot of laughs.
Yeah.
I remember being in the theater, kind of during the height of the Jim Carrey. He had that just amazing run, and everyone was all in on Jim Carrey. And seeing Liar Liar in a really crowded theater, and just he would go off on these kind of amazing physical, like he beats himself up in the bathroom and stuff. And I just remember because, like I said, Jim Carrey had a 100% approval rating there for a while, and so everyone was all in on everything he did. Unfortunately, I was trying to think of like more recent, and very, very little came to mind.
Yeah. It's such a tough question. I was like, I love this question.
I know, but it's a tough one.
I'm going to try to answer because I know I've laughed hard in a lot of films, but I don't always remember like the moments because the reality is my favorite comedies usually aren't like the big laugh out loud comedies. It's like the really clever, witty lines that I'm more like, that was good, and there's a lot of it. That said, I did think of a couple, and the one that was standing out to me when I was trying to answer this question earlier today was in Anchorman 2, which is not the funniest of movies, but the scene with the RV crash.
Yeah.
I remember just getting me and my friends in stitches in the theater.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is it sets it up so blatantly and hilarious. He starts off with, man, I tell you, installing this deep fryer is the best thing I ever did in this thing. And then his champ asks, hey, Ron, why do you have this bag full of bowling balls and this terrarium full of scorpions? He's like, that's a crazy story. And then you get hey, Ron, cruise control doesn't steer. It just controls speed. And then it crashes and all those things. The grease from the fryer, the bowling balls, the scorpions as they're tumbling around or just all hitting them and getting them. And it made for just great. Yeah. Like, this is so blatant and stupid, but they just played it just right. Yeah. Like, we know this is really stupid, so we're setting it up.
And that's, same with me, where it's like most of mine, like I was talking about with Jim Carrey, same with Will Ferrell. Like, when all of a sudden I remember seeing the original Anchorman in the theater, and I don't know if one particular moment stands out, but it's just like when all of a sudden everybody's just all in on a comedian, and then they have their big movie that comes out, and, like Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson with Wedding Crashers, or some of these movies where you're just, everybody's all in on the person in the moment, and you're just laughing at everything they do.
Yeah. One other movie moment I thought of, which wasn't so much tied to the movie, but it's one of my favorite dumb movies, is Kung Pao.
Yeah.
I've talked about it before. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous in all the right ways that tickle my funny bone. But my friends that I originally watched it with, it was two families. They were related. They were cousins, and I was hanging out with them. And they had both families been missionaries. One of them to France, and I always gave the sister, one of the sisters in the family, a hard time about. I would always joke about France, make fun of French stuff, just ignorant stuff that teenagers do, make fun of the French. And we're watching that movie together, and we're all just cackling and laughing. We're all in the right mood for it.
Yeah.
We're laughing so much, and it gets to the end, and the surprise is the aliens are French. And when that happens, when they drop that line,
you just lost it.
I just turned excitedly looking at her, and she had this look on her face like, oh gosh, like here we
go.
And I died, and I was like, this was perfect. Thank you, movie, for gifting me this moment of making fun of French people while I'm watching this with the people I make fun of French people with. And I'm sorry to all our French viewers and listeners.
We don't want to upset
that was immature of me, and you guys are fine. Keep watching, but that was hilarious.
Nice. Definitely, I did write down like a separate answer for like a funny moment, like not in a not a Will Ferrell or anything, and it's in Pulp Fiction when, this is a spoiler alert, but when John Travolta accidentally shoots Marvin, and he turns around and goes, "Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face." That may be the most I've ever laughed in my life, because you're so shocked, and then Tarantino just it's so matter of fact, like he just literally says what he just did, and I'd never heard anyone say, "I just shot such and such in the face" before, and that just really made me laugh.
Yeah, that's good.
That is good.
I think at some point we could probably do a whole podcast on just what are some of the best like line deliveries. Oh man, that's one of them. And I will say, like, I'm not even really that high on Travolta, but he's really good and really funny in that movie. Yeah. So. And then the movie Airplane just makes me laugh. For whatever reason, it's not for whatever reason, it's the algorithms on like Instagram and stuff, and I clicked on one of those clips from I think it was actually from The Naked Gun, but Airplane. But now,
very similar.
Now constantly like Leslie Nielsen clips are popping up, and I click on them every time. So of course the algorithm's going to keep feeding it to me. But every time I click on one and watch it, I'm just like, it was so good.
He is so good. In Airplane, there's this scene. The character's name is Ted Stryker, which to me is just funny. I don't know why. It's not even meant to be funny. Ted Stryker is just a funny name. And he's in a disco, and he like throws his jacket, and he does like the disco pose, and all of a sudden the jacket just comes flying back and lands on him. And he just, like, Airplane is a movie full of ridiculous things happening, but nobody reacts to the ridiculous things. Right. It's from 1980. It's really dated. I was just showing it to my kids this morning because church was canceled. And they were kind of like, yeah, like, I see how it's funny, but it wasn't, like, making them laugh like it made me laugh. So, a lot of funny little moments like that.
Yeah. Leslie Nielsen had... You're right. There's so many moments that, like, if I just say them right now, people will be like, "You're the dumbest person in the world." I know, right? It just delivers really well.
Yeah, they don't have people like him anymore. I don't feel like.
I'm trying to think of, like, because the great backstory of him is that he was a serious actor for so long.
That was the joke about.
Didn't know he could be funny, and they put him in Airplane. And just play it straight.
Play it straight. Well, all this ridiculous stuff is going on around him.
It turns out like he's fantastic at it.
And it's the birth of like Don't Call Me Shirley, which
late in career. Yeah, where he's.
I bet you anything like Airplane is why they were willing to cast him in Naked Gun. Right? Yeah, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're thinking like, who's somebody who's been a serious actor up to this point, like that could make a comedic turn like late in life, and
all of a sudden Daniel Day-Lewis is just.
Please, Daniel. Please come back.
I know, we've talked about this before.
Type movie.
We know you're the greatest actor. Do a fun movie, please. Yes. Okay, is it my turn to ask a question? Yes. Okay, I'm going to ask this just because I want to hear your answer, and your name was specifically mentioned in this question. So someone messaged me and said they listened to our best and worst of 2023, and you made the point when you're talking about Maestro, you said this movie has nothing to say. So then someone asked a question, which I thought was a really good question. To you, does a movie have to have something to say, or does the movie have to have that weight to it, or a big, here's what the movie is, but here's what it's really about for you to enjoy it?
So first off, I want to say this. I'm assuming you have. Have you seen the movie Adaptation?
Yes.
All right.
Nicolas Cage.
Charlie Kaufman movie where Charlie Kaufman wrote and directed the movie. I think he wrote it. I know he wrote it. I
think he did both. I think.
But he writes a movie in which himself, Charlie Kaufman, is trying to adapt a story into a movie.
Yes.
Nicolas Cage plays Charlie Kaufman in the movie, also makes up a twin brother for himself. But as he's trying to adapt this movie, in the movie, he goes to see Robert McKee, who is this famous screenplay writing guru, wrote a book called Story, about how to write screenplays. And he goes to this, and the whole thing is that he wants to write a movie that's basically nothing really happens, just like real life. And so in a question time, and Robert McKee is played by Brian Cox, who's doing his great, Brian Cox, kind of like angry, like, kind of yell my answers at people thing. And he nervously asks this question, like, what if I want to make a movie where nothing really happens, people just sort of struggle along and no characters change or nothing happens? And Brian Cox does this great rant and response where he's like, nothing happens like in the real world. Nothing happens in the real world. He's like, every day, war, famine, people betraying people saving people, like, and just this whole great. And he's like, if you can't find that in real life, why am I wasting my 2 hours on your stupid movie?
Nice.
Just a great response.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's so true. You can make a story out of anything. Now, that being said, like, stories don't have to say something significant. I think that's very important to say. What I think, though, is maybe it'd be a better word to say that every movie should have some sort of intention behind it. Are you making a point? If you are, like, what is your greater point? Not every movie has to be making some point. Are you raising a question, perhaps? Do you watch a movie and you're trying to make people question something? Maybe you're just trying to evoke a feeling. That would be most, kind of like comedies. Like, they're just trying to make you, like, feel good and enjoy.
Right.
So, like, most movies have a point. I was thinking of this really small movie called Patterson, starring Adam Driver, that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
He plays a guy who's a bus driver who likes to write poetry, and he lives this very, like, simple, routine life. And it sort of just follows his character, and it's very quiet. Not a lot happens, but it's definitely a movie that just sort of is meant to evoke this feeling. It's just sort of this, like, peaceful, easygoing movie, and it kind of raises maybe, like, some questions about, like, art and what it means to be an artist, because he's not, like, any way eccentric or anything. He's just this guy who quietly likes to write his poetry. And I really enjoyed that movie. A lot of people would watch it and maybe go, it's boring or it's not saying enough.
Right.
But it had a point. Like, there was an intention behind it. I think it did exactly, you knew exactly what they were going for. I think with Maestro, they were trying to do so much that they really didn't land on anything.
Yeah.
I got done and I was like, okay, did you have a point? Did you want me to feel a certain way about this character? Did you want me to ask questions about this character? Was the point that genius comes at a cost? I don't feel like you got that across. Like, I didn't get that in this movie. Were you trying to make a point that he was a genius? I didn't get that in the movie. Were you trying to, the relationships are hard. And whatever you were going for,
it didn't work.
In the end, I was going like, I don't know what you're wanting to do as a movie. I don't know if you're trying to give me a feeling, if you're trying to make me feel inspired by creativity, I just don't know. It just felt like a mess that didn't land anywhere. And so in the end, I'm just like, why did I spend my 2 hours on your movie? What was your point in making this? And that's what I think the movie has to have. It has to have at least some sort of intention in what it's doing.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I mean, and I would agree with that. I wrote down a quote from Roger Ebert. I wish I was smart enough to have thought of this myself, but he said, it's not what a movie is about, it's how it is about it. And so, basically what he's saying is he's like, I don't care. He would never say, like, well, this is just an action movie, so I automatically don't like it. His point was, I don't care if it's an action movie, that's fine, but is it well done? Is the action, am I engaged in this movie? Do I care about at least one character in this movie? Same thing, a comedy. Okay, that's fine if it's a comedy, but make me laugh if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd agree. So what do you think about, like we talked, like when we did our 80s action movie draft, Commando. What do you think? Like, same thing. Like, it's just evoking, like, I just want to sit here and be entertained.
Right.
Okay, so that stuff doesn't...
Yeah, because it had an intention. It was, I want people to sit there and be like, that's awesome.
That's awesome. And Arnold rules. And mission accomplished.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. I think my criticism comes from movies, like a Maestro or something, that, like, I don't know how to articulate this. Some movies almost feel like they automatically just have their nose up in the air. Like, look, this is just so you guys know, this is a prestige movie, and it's really good. And then it's not. And that's what aggravates me is movies that, or it's like movies that think they have something to say, but they really don't. Mm-hmm. That's what frustrates me. I don't mind to watch a prestige movie or oh man, this movie it's got a bigger picture to it. Okay, that's fine, but does it? Or do you just think that it does?
Yeah.
And I would agree with you completely on something like Maestro, where you're like, I think you got so wrapped up in thinking you were making a great movie that you just ultimately didn't. So, yeah.
Sometimes there's just too many ingredients in the stew, and it ends up tasting like nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Fair enough.
All right. I think this one kind of flows well from that. So this is a question from my friend Jared Roberts, and it actually wasn't asked on this post. He asked it a while back on a post I did on Instagram where I asked for some questions, and I answered them, and then he commented with a couple more questions. So he said, name a movie that's really good despite not telling a great story, and then conversely, name a movie that's really bad even though it's telling a great story. And I was like, I love this question.
I do too.
I'm going to let you answer first because that's the way that we do it. So, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
You want me to start with really good despite not telling us? Well, I mean, really, I grew up on movies like that.
Yeah.
You pick your Commandos, your Cobras, your stuff. Like, a lot of those 80s movies, I think, were just about, like you said, I'm just here to entertain you. Or whether it's some ridiculous action movie or, like Back to the Future, let's say. I don't think Back to the Future ultimately is trying to teach me a whole lot.
Right.
But it's like, man, we just came up with the most original, creative, fun, funny, heartwarming. There's a lot of things in there and they all work, but I don't think it has like a real big message. And that movie's just a blast. So I just grew up on movies like that aren't reaching for the stars. But are really, really great movies.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer, but...
I labored over this one, probably the longest of any question.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it could be really easy to answer this question because most comedies, most action movies would fall under this category. So what I really wanted to do was not pick one of those. I wanted to be like, okay, is there a movie out there that doesn't know it's not telling a great story, but is trying to, and it doesn't really, but somehow it still works out because just maybe the character, or maybe the actors do such great performances that's directed really well. And I was going through and I was like, no, this is really hard because if that's their aim is to tell a really great story and it's not a great story, it just never works. And then it hit me. The answer was so obvious. My favorite movie of all time, The Social Network.
Yeah.
The reality is The Social Network is not a great story.
Yeah.
If you tell me what the story is, I'm like,
it doesn't sound.
What a lame movie.
It's really about
someone who makes a website and some people are suing them over the creation of that website. And I'd be like, well, the real entertainment's in the details. Even if I start prying into the details, they're not that interesting. But man,
it all comes together.
Craft the story and act it and direct it and score it so wonderfully that I'm enthralled over a story that otherwise I could care less about.
Yeah.
Most true stories, if I watch a good movie about them, I'm like, you know what I'd like to see is a documentary that tells me everything that really happened because that's fascinating. The Social Network is definitely the exception. I could care less. I don't ever want to watch a documentary about Mark Zuckerberg and these real people because I'm like, I would fall asleep.
Yeah.
It had to be a boring movie. Even something like Oppenheimer, which does a lot of the same things really well, at least the making of the atomic bomb is just significant and interesting to anyone. It has to be. It's too significant. Making a Facebook, who cares?
Yeah.
And so,
that's a really great answer.
Once I realized that, I was like, I've never really, I think I have thought about before, it's not a great story, or, what a story I wouldn't expect to care about. But just the reality of, I don't think it's even a good story.
Yeah.
They just tell it so daggum well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great way to look at it. Like I said, I just looked at it as all these beloved movies I grew up with. Like I said, they weren't aiming for, I'm going to set out to make the greatest movie of all time. But it just was, Ghostbusters is a good example too. Yeah. Not really any kind of great story there. It's original and it's fun. And it just turns into this awesome movie. And so I didn't actually even narrow it down to one movie. I just wrote so many of the movies that I grew up with. Just they weren't trying to tell the big story. They were just, we're going to give you your money's worth, and you're going to have a blast for the next hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah. And then, if I want to give a very modern answer, Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
We all know, we laugh about how, the story is
They wouldn't
nothing.
even, no, it's nothing.
It had to be, a note on a napkin.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody was like, here will be the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's such a fun movie.
Such
it doesn't
a fun
matter
movie.
that the story, the bad guy's so hilariously vague and
Oh my
anonymous.
gosh. It's like that's even one of those movies where so explain the mission. If someone put me on the spot right now, I've seen Top Gun Maverick 6 times, and they're like, explain the details of the mission and what they're trying to do. If I was going to get a letter grade on that, I'd probably get a D. I'm like, I don't remember. They're blowing something up? Because it doesn't, who cares? I'm just having a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, did you see they announced Top Gun 3?
You messaged me about it?
I did. Didn't know if you saw that or not. Yeah.
So do you have an example of a movie that's really bad even though it's telling a great story?
Yes. Crash.
Okay.
That one was so easy for me. Crash, little history, it's 2004, 2005. Won Best Picture at the Oscars. That movie thinks it is so important, and it's dealing with really heavy stuff, racism and basically racism more than anything, and some class type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just not a very good movie.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that. It's not really a hot take because people say that all the time, where they're like, that's one of the worst movies ever to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
But it's a take I completely agree with.
I think its reputation is definitely hurt in the long run by the fact it won Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it had won Best Picture, if it was just a movie that come out, people would be like, Crash, yeah, whatever, it's fine. But it won Best Picture, and it was whoa.
Well, this is not really. It's really heavy-handed, and the racial character, there's no subtlety in that movie. And not that a movie has to be subtle. I'm not saying that, but it's just not good. And I'm going
to get myself in trouble here. It has all the subtlety of a faith-based movie.
Yeah. Amen. Maybe we could do our own podcast on that, or a podcast on that one day. Like I said, it's like one of those movies that very much has its nose up in the air. It's like, don't worry, we'll tackle this and we'll tackle racism. And it's not done that well.
Yeah.
So that's always just stuck out for me.
I wrote down 2 answers. One is Remember the Titans. I'm going to my classics here.
You got to stick with what works.
But the reality is, I do think that there's probably a really compelling story to tell in the true story of this football team.
And the battles they faced.
Yes, tell it, get into the real struggles that these people had. Don't Disneyfy it. Don't have them
solve their problems with dancing.
Yes. I was going to say, don't have them singing on the buses, but actually, I saw a behind-the-scenes thing where somebody said that the one character really did sing all the time. So, okay, have them sing, but just don't have them all harmonize perfectly together. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's probably really is a compelling story to tell there. And I would rather see, it sounds weird to say,
the grittier.
But yes, but the more grounded.
The non-Disney version.
Yeah,
to me, that's the best way to say it.
And the other one that I wrote down is The Northman, which is
Robert Eggers.
Yeah. Because the setup of it is, I shouldn't say a great story, but it's a Viking revenge story.
You're like, this movie's going to be awesome.
Yeah, how could a Viking revenge story with this cool visual style as it has,
the violence and all that stuff?
He just chooses to take the weirdest turn every chance he can.
I know. He's a really strange filmmaker.
And when it ends, you're just going why? Sometimes I get it. You don't just give people the most obvious thing they want.
Right.
Sometimes people don't know what they want until they get it. But he feels
he feels like he's going out of his way to not give you what you want.
He feels like he makes movies where he goes, okay, audience, I know you want this, so let me give you the exact opposite of what
he feels like he wants to take his audience off.
Yeah.
Give me just 1 second here. I want to go through. I want to make sure I ask the questions I want to ask. Oh, I thought this was a really cool question. I think this is one of my kids. I think Ryan might have asked this. What is an awesome movie from a real... take a really famous... Spielberg is an obvious one. Mm-hmm. A really famous director. What's one of his awesome movies that people either don't know about because it's early, or that just doesn't get the recognition it deserves? Maybe because some of his other or his or her other movies do. So that was a good question.
Yeah. I wrote for this one, Is It Too Early to Say the Killer by David Fincher. So I did write, the challenge becomes identifying who's a famous director, because in my mind, like, if I know who they are, I think they're famous enough. Because I'm not, like, in the weeds. I don't know everybody. And,
right.
But I was like, for most people, there's probably only a handful of directors. You know, there's probably only 5 that they really know. And so I tried to stick to those.
Yeah.
Spielberg was one you mentioned. Mm-hmm. It's tough because the other thing is, with these big directors, every movie that they have come out with gets a level of attention.
Sure.
And so I was really sticking with one of the ones that kind of came and went, you know, seemingly like they don't get talked about as much anymore. I actually really liked Bridge of Spies. Mm-hmm. And boy, that one just like immediately was lost to, you know, the public consciousness. Mark Rylance won a Best Supporting Actor for that.
Everyone was ticked off because they wanted Stallone to win for Creed.
They did. And that was actually, it was a loaded year of nominees. And so it's one of those things where, like, I was like, I think Mark Rylance was great in that movie. Mm-hmm. He should have gotten the nomination, and that should have been the reward he got for being great in that movie. Because like I was rooting for Stallone, but honestly, there was someone else. I think it might have been the year of like Christian Bale in The Big Short,
maybe,
or something like that. There's some other performance.
It's like a loaded
also,
year, like you said.
That guy, like, he probably actually had what I think was the best performance of the year for that role. But so Bridge of Spies, that was just a really good movie, and man, it just.
I've never once heard anyone talk about that movie.
I wrote out 5 just to kind of give you a heads up. Christopher Nolan, we talked about it on our Christopher Nolan podcast, that Insomnia is a movie that Christopher Nolan's a guy that I almost didn't write down anything because like every one of his films seems to get like plenty of attention and love, but Insomnia does seem like the one that gets kind of brushed over. Even Memento, which was before it, I think because of its whole unique gimmick, like people remember and people talk about, but Insomnia really gets brushed over.
It really does. It's really surprising, too, because Robin Williams is the bad guy in that movie.
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Peter Jackson, The Frighteners.
Oh, my gosh. I had that on my list. I didn't know anybody else liked that movie.
Yeah.
That's incredible that we've known each other for that. Movie rules.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. That movie is awesome. Okay, let's stop. Let's pause.
We're pausing.
I'm taking over for a second. That movie is awesome. It doesn't quite work because he's trying to blend a lot of genres, but what a fun original movie that was. I say that movie was 10 years ahead of its time. I think if that movie would have come out, it came out in 96, saw it in the theater by myself in the very noticed hardly anybody else there, but I think that movie is ahead of its time with some of the visuals and like the blending of the genres, and Michael J. Fox is great in that movie.
So what I was gonna say is it really is like Michael J. Fox grown up, and
he's not Marty McFly anymore.
But he's still got
that
charm and charisma, and it really, like, you watch it and you're like, man, why did Michael J. Fox not continue to be like one of the biggest stars in the world?
I just realized I started chomping ice. Sorry. I love that movie. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
And I checked it. It bombed. Yeah. Made like $15 million. It was a bomb, but I encourage people to check it out. It's really good.
Yeah, like I said, it's just a fun one.
That movie, that just made my day that you brought that up.
I'm so glad. The last 2 are actually recent movies. One is Ron Howard's 13 Lives, which is based on the true story of the. I'm going to forget where they were from. It's a soccer team that gets trapped in these.
I'm not even going to try and say it because I don't know.
And it's the rescue attempt and the divers that figure out how to
like
navigate these caves. Yeah, really good movie, and it's another one that I think we've talked about several times. I think it came straight to Prime.
I think it did,
and probably why it got largely overlooked.
Yeah,
but really good movie. And then Ridley Scott's The Last Duel. Yeah, which we think we talked about before as well. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck riding together again. This great movie in 3 parts, as it's a story telling what happened through 3 different perspectives. It's kind of showing how like people perceive things different ways, and by the end, it doesn't really tell you how it really happened. You kind of just have to piece together like, okay, I saw it from their perspective, then his perspective, then her perspective.
That's really cool.
They do end on her perspective, so you're probably...
That's what sticks with you.
She is probably the most empathetic of them all, so you probably lean towards like, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell you like hers is the right version. It just tells you all 3 parts, and then shows you the fallout, and
Yeah.
it's a fascinating movie. And Ridley Scott, no one's more upset than Ridley Scott that people didn't see that movie. So
He's very vocal about
Yeah.
a lot of things. But yeah, it's always weird to me, like big director, big stars, writers, everything, and it just comes and goes with no fanfare at all.
the unfortunate thing is, the reality is, it was a movie made for adults, and not enough adults
Go
are
out
just going
to
to
the
see
movies.
movies. Movie markets are driven by teenagers.
Teens. Yeah.
Basically, it's people who have expendable time and money,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the ones that are seeing the movies, which is why you get 8,000 Transformers movies.
Fair enough. Ugh, unfortunately. All right, those were great answers. And
Thank you.
man, I would just love. Oh my gosh, I'd love the Frighteners. I can't believe you brought up the Frighteners. Although I'm mad that you got to mention it before I did. And like you said, I kind of took the same criteria where these like Spielberg, he's so famous.
Mm-hmm.
In some way or another, all their movies do get a little attention. So I went way back. So I'm going to recommend early Spielberg, a movie called Duel, which is actually, it was a made-for-TV movie. It's like early 70s. And it's this guy, he's like on a road trip, and this semi starts chasing him. And that is the entire movie. And you never learn who's driving the semi, and he like terrorizes him. He's like stalking him, and he's trying to make him wreck his car. It's like you watch Duel. It'd be a great double feature to watch Duel and then watch Jaws.
All right, I was gonna say I actually haven't seen it, but it's what he did before Jaws,
Yeah,
right?
Yep. He did it before Jaws, and it's kind of just Jaws, but instead of a shark, it's a semi.
Yeah.
And
Sounds funny when you say it like
I
that.
know, right? But it's like, it's really dated because it's like early 70s. But you're like, okay, like this makes sense that Spielberg became Spielberg. And then I went with my guy Scorsese, and this is actually not one of his early movies. He did a movie in 1999 called Breaking Out the Dead with Nicolas Cage, Ving Rhames, John Goodman, the names escape me now. Arquette, is it Patricia Arquette? Patricia Arquette's in it.
Patricia Arquette.
It is, I love it. Nicolas Cage is an ambulance driver who's basically losing his mind. And it is so visually compelling. I love it. And it bombed, and no one ever talks about it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're 2 for 2 on ones I haven't seen, so you're right about movies that are overlooked.
Duel and Bringing Out the Dead. Two very random answers from me, but two really cool movies from, arguably the two best directors of all time. I mean, I wouldn't argue with anyone if they said that. And
Right.
those are a movie from each of them that I don't feel like gets any recognition. So
Yeah. I do know when I saw this question, the first thing I thought of is a movie I haven't even seen, but I know a lot of people say with Scorsese, is it Hugo?
Hugo?
That they're like,
it's really
a
good.
great movie that people just didn't see. And
Well,
didn't give
so
credit for.
Hugo's actually kind of funny. People did see it. It made like over $100 million, but it's kind of considered a bomb because it was really expensive. And it's Scorsese doing a PG movie,
Right.
basically a children's movie. And he'll tell you that. He's like, I wanted to play around with 3D.
Yeah.
I wanted to try 3D. And he's telling it's like an old Hollywood type of movie. And it is a good movie. That's a good answer too. Really good movie. And then, but people are like, oh, come on, Scorsese, just have gangsters shooting each other in the head again. But yeah, if you want to see Scorsese do what's essentially a children's movie, check out Hugo. It is good.
Yep. All right. I wanted to ask this question because I want to hear your answer on this one. What is the best performance ever from Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie?
I will tell you, in my opinion, one Arnold Schwarzenegger's best performance is in Terminator 2, which is also his best movie, which is also one of the all-time great movies, in my opinion. I have nothing but great things to say about Terminator 2. Arnold is just worth having a conversation about because it's funny. Arnold, unfortunately for him, he almost gets he gets more recognition for people imitating his voice, or doing the "I'll be back," and everyone knows that. Even if you don't know Arnold or know his movies, people do that. I have always thought Arnold is a good actor. I'm not saying he's De Niro in Raging Bull or anything, but you watch something like Terminator 2. And, you automatically like, well, he hardly says anything. And he's literally a robot. So he's, very robotic, kind of wooden in the movie. But if you watch just the little nuances or just the ways he, like the movie starts and he's very, very just in robot mode. But one of the themes of Terminator 2 is that he can learn and he can grow. And he starts to form this bond with the kid. And you watch it and as it progresses, it's really cool, like how Arnold does it, and just like I said, the little things he does. And by the time Terminator 2 ends, it's emotional when him and this kid say goodbye to each other. So I think Arnold is awesome in Terminator 2. And I would even make the argument that Arnold doesn't get quite enough credit for being the actor that he is. I'm not saying he should have Oscars, but he had a very specific screen presence. He had the physical, obviously, he had the muscles and all that, but he knew exactly how to use it. He knew how to pick roles that played into that. And he even got, like Kindergarten Cop or some of these movies that are ridiculous simply because of Arnold. They are fun movies.
Yeah.
Because of Arnold's willingness to not take himself too seriously. He didn't mind to poke a little bit of fun at himself. I think Arnold's a good actor, and I think Terminator 2 is his best performance.
Yeah. I wrote, this is a tough one because I think, like anybody with mostly anything, the longer that Arnold was doing it, being acting, the better he was getting.
Sure.
So in reality, he probably was doing his best acting in something in the late 90s, early 2000s. The problem is the best movies he was in, the best characters he was playing, the best use of his talents was in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a really good point.
I was not going to pick anything. Was Arnold really doing better acting in like The Sixth Day, the clone movie? Maybe, but the movie just wasn't good, and I don't remember anything about it.
And kind of like Arnold's window had kind of like that, his time had come and gone.
It's possible, like True Lies or something that
True
does
Lies, he's good
implement
in True
his
Lies.
like humor. But honestly, what I went with was Predator.
Yeah.
And here's why. Like you said, we all know that Arnold got a start because of his physique, because he's this big, muscly guy that looks good on
You've just
screen.
never seen anybody like him before.
What you were basically saying, and what I was saying is the thing that's underrated is he's actually got a very expressive face.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the time he plays kind of cool, steely characters. Commando, he's got one mode. He's like, I'm confident and I'm kicking butt and I'm taking names.
Yeah.
And I'm delivering funny lines. I actually thought about it because he's so good at that.
He's so perfect at it.
In Predator, his character really does show every kind of emotion there is.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's scenes where he gets to play it cool and confident. He gets to be angry. He gets to be
scared.
Surprised. He gets to be scared. And all of that, none of it, of course, is through the dialogue. He's not talking to anybody saying,
it's his
I'm
body
scared.
language.
It's basically just like the director, you can tell, is like, I need you to react to that. There's something creepy over there, and we got to see in your face you're shocked or surprised.
And he does it.
And he does a great job of it. It reminded me of a story from a movie I don't like, because I already talked about not liking it on here, from Gladiator. I saw this clip of Russell Crowe talking about making that movie. And he was talking about one of the first days on set. They're getting ready to film like the big battle sequence at the beginning. And in the movie, a bird flies by, and his character just sort of watches the bird fly by. Well, in reality, there was no bird. Mm-hmm. They're just on this, either set or
green screen
location. And Ridley Scott just throws out to him and says, hey, I want you just to react to a bird is going to fly across the sky, and I just want you to react to what's happening and see what's going on. And so Russell Crowe was like, okay, whatever. And so he just does it. He just kind of sits there and makes a little look, like watching a bird fly by. And apparently, like, after he did that, the way he did it, Ridley's like, okay, I know I can trust this guy. I can give him whatever, and he can do it. And that was, like, a small thing in a movie I don't care about, but it's like, that actually is a good story. Like, I wonder how often that happens with actors. Like, I need you just to give me this look. Just a bird's flying by, and there's no bird, and can you, as an actor, just make subtle enough of a face, but give me something in your face that tells me I'm watching a bird, and what's supposed to be a beautiful moment in this tense, about to be a battle, sequence. And I was like, who really nails that is Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. That guy's going, hey, give me, I think I saw something move in the jungle, but I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if there's something trying to kill me out there. Give me that face. And Arnold's got to sit there and just, as an actor, like if that was me, I'm sitting there something going like, I don't know what to do. Like, how do I make that face?
He does.
Arnold delivers, and never once do I think, well, that's not a face a person would make, but I know exactly what he's conveying.
Yeah.
And that's, so I think we're on the same page. Arnold doesn't get enough credit for his ability to convey what he needs to on the screen.
And I think, too, like, you look at Arnold, Predator, Terminator, Commando, they're, like Red Dawn or whatever, Red Heat. These movies that, because of, like I said, because of Arnold, Running Man, some of them like that, like, he's so good and so entertaining. But think of how many people they've tried to give that kind of titled to in the last 15 years that don't deliver. And I'm not trying to take shots at any actors, but like Vin Diesel, he's tried to launch different, Fast and Furious has worked for him, but he's tried to launch these generic action franchises and they don't work because he's not Arnold. He's not as entertaining. He's not, you're not as glued into him on the screen like you were to Arnold. So he's underrated, I think, even though he's considered one of the, especially at the time, like when Terminator 2 came out, he was the biggest star in the world. Yeah. But I think the guy's, for what he needed to do, I think he's a good actor. And yep.
We only have a few questions left. You want to go kind of speed round with
Sure,
these?
we can do a couple speed rounds. You want to just throw them out?
I'll just throw them out. So let me see what we have here. What's the goriest movie you've ever seen?
Terrifier 2.
Terrifier 2. I actually Googled what are some of the goriest movies to see if I'd seen any of them.
It's not really a question for you.
That was on list, and I was like, I don't have a lot of them. My answers I don't feel like are really satisfactory because I'm like, you got your over-the-top action gore like Kill Bill, where it's almost for like comedic effect of your horror comedies that kind of, again, play that for comedic effect, like a Ready or Not.
Yeah.
And then you got war movies like Saving Private Ryan. And I was
Saving Private Ryan was
I've probably seen a couple of horror movies that were gory, and I block them out of my mind.
It's not your cup of tea, is it? Terrifier 2 is, like, it's so, like, it goes to ridiculous. Like, you almost chuckle because it's so over-the-top gory. Also, shout out to Peter Jackson. One of his early movies is called Dead Alive. That is an unbelievable, it's a horror comedy, and it's so over-the-top violent. There's a scene with a guy, some zombies, and a lawnmower. Okay. I'll just say that. I'll just leave it there. And
I'd say a lot of movies usually are pretty ripe for some gore.
Terrifier 2 is the goriest movie I've ever seen.
Somebody asked, does Bodhi live or die at the end of Point Break?
In my mind, he dies because they never made more, like, that separate question, has anything ever squandered more sequel opportunities than Point Break? How is there not Point Break 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? And then, like, in 3, Bodhi just returns. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you just described the Fast and the Furious franchise.
I did. It should. Yeah, Point Break is
literally.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So I'm going to say he dies.
I wish I had some cool take, but Bodhi's 100% dead at the end of that. Yeah. He talks about at the beginning of the movie not planning to live past
certain age or whatever.
Which, because they're talking about that storm coming and surfing it, and somebody's like, it's suicide. He's like, I'm going to live past that anyways. And then he's caught, and he's like, let me go. And you see him crash. He's dead.
Point Break rules, by the way.
It rules. Best movie president of all time. And actually, I should clarify with this question. I didn't clarify when I sent it to you. They said, you can go with real president depicted in a movie or fictional one if you want to split it up. And I did kind of go like my favorite depiction of a real president and my favorite fictional.
Did you? I just went fictional.
Yeah.
I got to go with Bill Pullman in Independence Day.
That was my fictional.
He is so wooden through that whole movie. And then all of a sudden he gives that speech in a ridiculous movie. And you're like, you know what? Yes,
I'm voting for him.
I'm voting for him. I'll get in that spaceship now and start flying around. He just, all of a sudden, he just comes to life in like the last 20 minutes of that movie, and Bill Pullman he's really likable in that movie.
Yeah.
So I went with him.
That was my fictional answer. My real answer, again, I'm not breaking new ground here. Daniel Day-Lewis's Lincoln. It's an amazing performance.
Oh my gosh.
And I noted, if we included if we included TV. I've been doing too much basketball.
Too much basketball, yeah.
If we included TV, I'd go Jed Bartlett from The West Wing because that's, again, not breaking new ground with these answers, but they're the best. Somebody asked, what is your favorite subgenre of movie? And they gave some examples. But
gosh, everyone would probably expect me to say superhero. I'd probably honestly say gangster movies. I very rarely have seen a gangster movie I don't like. It's just an interesting world to be in. And to get even more specific, Scorsese gangster movies. Yeah. I just love his look or his kind of insight into that world, and I love how he depicts it on screen. We've talked about before, nobody's better at that kind of brutal, realistic violence than Scorsese, I think. And so probably the Scorsese gangster genre, Goodfellas, Casino, Departed, Mean Streets, so on.
Yeah. This is another one I wrote. I love this question until I struggle to think of an answer.
Right.
I was like, because I don't know what it is as I'm thinking about it. I tried to think through a lot of my favorite movies and see, like, is there a common denominator? Is there a mode in here, which is a mathematical term for the most common recurring statistic? I want to discover that most of my favorite movies are in genres or subgenres that I wouldn't think of as like my favorite. You know, I'd be like, I don't really care for that genre, but that's a great movie. So I didn't even really come up with an answer. The only, you know, I kind of go back to, I don't know if it's a genre, is Smartest Guy in the Room, a subgenre of movie. You know, I thought underdog movies. I do really like underdog movies, and
it's usually
that's not just sports. I usually like somebody who's in a situation that they've really got to overcome. You know, they really got to punch up to get through.
Well, that works really well on screen. You know, like you have someone to root for. You want to see someone succeed.
And you know, it's one of those popular for a reason. Like, is that, you know, the most like artistic choice? Like, oh, you like the underdog story? That's what everybody likes. Yeah, that's my favorite. I'm a sucker for happy endings.
Sure.
I'm a sucker for you know, for the overcomer. Like, I buy into those stories.
It makes, when done well, it always makes for really good. I mean, really good movies.
Yeah, you could make Rocky an underdog over and over again, and I'm still going to buy in.
Yep. I mean, look how long they stretched out the Rocky franchise just off of this guy's an underdog.
Yeah.
That's the premise of Rocky. This guy's the ultimate underdog, and they got 30, 40 years out of it. So yeah.
It's great subgenre. And then the last question we have here, which I'm glad we saved for last, because it's from my friend Greg, who's just trying to give me a hard time. Yeah. He said, why is it that only weirdos like Nightcrawler, the Jake Gyllenhaal movie?
Which is so funny. We just talked about Nightcrawler a couple weeks ago, did we not?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you brought up, what movie did you bring up? And we talked about,
we were talking about Gyllenhaal. We were talking about Roadhouse, maybe.
Yeah, yes, you were looking forward to it. I said, Gyllenhaal's always good.
Yeah.
And we both said he's really good in Nightcrawler.
So I showed Nightcrawler to two friends. One of them loved it, my friend Nick, and one of them hated it, my friend Greg. Yeah. And so Greg just always gives us a hard time when we talk about it being good. He calls it Earthworm instead of Nightcrawler, just to try to make us mad. Right. And gives me a hard time about it. So, Greg, I just want you to know, I wrote a very honest answer. I said, because only weirdos watch enough movies to develop good taste.
There you go.
That's what it is. Yeah. Most people are out there busy, living lives, doing activities.
And they're not going to pay attention to a movie like Nightcrawler.
Right. And even when they do watch it, it's like, this is a weird movie. Yeah, it is weird. You know what? That's probably why I love it, because it's just different than all the other movies that I watch.
It is. I say this a lot on the podcast when I go back and re-listen to our episodes. I'm always surprised how much I'll say, like, it's weird, but in the best way possible. Because, that's the truth is most movies are just a carbon copy of some other movie, and that just keeps happening for years and years and years. And so when something does stand out, and sometimes to stand out, you have to be different and willing to take risks and not afraid to make people uncomfortable and all these things. And a lot of times that does make for great movies.
Yeah, and, you know, I sit here and say, like, my favorite subgenre might be the underdog movie, the overcomer movie. And yet, as I said, most of my favorite movies I look at don't fit into categories I think. So many of my favorite movies
are weird,
are not underdog overcoming movies. So many of them are movies like Nightcrawler, where it's not a good guy. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a dark movie about a guy who's got issues and is probably a sociopath. And it's just, I love it because I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know where it's going to go.
It's original.
It's taking me on this journey, but it's really well made, incredibly acted, and I'm locked in. I'm fascinated. And so that's, you know, it's probably it. That's the secret to a good movie I could talk about. Going back to, what was the quote from, did you say it was?
Roger Ebert.
Roger Ebert.
A movie is not what it's about how it is about it.
Yes. So we're, you know, these movies that are about it so well. You know, it's a movie about a sociopath and has commentary about sort of voyeurism and people loving to consume terrible news stories. And he's the cameraman who will go in without a conscience and film whatever and get right in those crashes. And
Gyllenhaal's the perfect guy for it because he's not afraid to take those chances as an actor. And listen, I'm not arguing with him if he's like, that's a weird movie. Yeah. Correct. It is a weird movie for sure. Yeah.
Well, that was conclude
fun.
Our first one of these. Yeah. First of hopefully many.
I hope we'll do some more because I was really happy with the questions we got. Yeah. And like you said, we did purposely keep some questions aside because they're probably going to get their own podcast, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. And, you know, we're just excited to get, like I said, into 2024. I'm not sure what the first new release movie of it will get its own podcast. But
I don't know. Sure it might be a hot minute.
Yeah. It could be all the way until maybe Dune 2.
It could be. Well, January, February are famously not the most amazing times for new releases. Yeah. So.
So,
biggest takeaway from this is go watch The Frighteners.
yes.
Which I might do tonight because now I'm so excited that you brought that up. Did you see it in the theater?
I did not.
Yeah, you were probably...
I remember seeing previews for when it came out, but yeah, I think I was a little too young to it is rated R. It's not a hard R.
It's not a hard R at all.
If it came out now, it'd probably be a PG-13 movie. But
it even had a cool. I remember, when I was growing up, you'd only see the posters for movies in the movie theater.
Yeah.
There was no internet to look them up, and they had this poster, and it just said The Frighteners, and it was almost looked like a white screen, like we've got our green screens behind us, and this ghost type thing was bursting out, and it said, "Welcome to the other side of the other side."
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to go see that movie. I hadn't even seen a trailer or anything. It just was like The Frighteners, Michael J. Fox, welcome to the other side of the other side. And I was like, sold, going to see it. And I've always loved that movie.
Yeah, I just love, I didn't know it was Peter Jackson until after I had seen the Lord of the Rings movie stuff. Then I went back and was like, oh, he's the guy who did The Frighteners?
But
I didn't realize.
In a weird way, it does kind of make sense.
Yeah. The sort of visual effects.
The visuals. How willing he was to, like I said, that movie is so ahead of its time with what they're, and in turn, some of the effects you're like, they weren't quite there with it, but he went for it.
Yeah, but I love being able to say were you in on Peter Jackson before The Lord of the Rings? I was. I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Because I was in on The Frighteners.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for
Good
this episode, and we will see you guys.
See you next week.
Next time.